Doug Ford just called Mark Carney Santa Claus. Ontario's supposedly conservative premier walked out of the First Ministers' meeting, where the country's premiers and prime minister gathered, with a grin on his face, praising the new Liberal prime minister for handing out political gifts like he was flying in from the North Pole. And look, while other premiers like Danielle Smith and Scott Moe came to this meeting pushing hard on pipelines, energy development, and sovereignty, Ford sounded like he was auditioning for a role in Carney's cabinet. So what happened in Saskatoon? Is Ford falling in line with the Liberals again, much like what we saw during the federal election? Is he hedging his bets with a future candidacy in the federal Liberal cabinet, or what? Well, I'll let you be the judge. Let's just take a quick listen of what Ford had to say.
I'm going to be very blunt here. This has been the best meeting we've had in 10 years. Simple. Best meeting I've had in 7 years. And there was no expectations that the Prime Minister was going to come out and say, you get that project, you get that project. It was a great discussion. Now, we were all talking. Now it's time to put it into action. All of us are responsible. But I thought it was an incredible meeting, great communication, great collaboration, and we all walked out of that room united. And that's the most important thing. Now the Prime Minister is going to go to work, get the legislation passed, and we'll divvy it up. I described him today as Santa Claus. He's coming, and his sled was full of all sorts of stuff. Now he's taking off back to the North Pole. He's going to sort it out, and then he's going to call us. So, and we're building a short of Santa Claus is my big belly. I got to loan it to him.
So on June 2nd, Canada's premiers met in Saskatoon for the First Ministers' meeting, the first time the gathering had been held in Saskatchewan in 40 years. The meeting was marked by an unusual consensus among the premiers and the federal government as Carney outlined a new 2-year timeline for approving nation-building projects under a streamlined federal process. The plan includes eliminating internal trade barriers and forming Indigenous equity partnerships. But as you'll find out later in the video, that consensus was shattered only a day later, so make sure you stay tuned for that. But on top of praising Carney and calling it the best meeting in a decade, Ford continued with his anti-Trump rhetoric during the press conference. He said, quote, "Let's not forget that President Trump has declared an economic war on every single business, every single person in this country, and we need to do everything we can to fight against him. And I think the president is going to have a rude awakening. We're going to unleash our strengths," he added, referencing upcoming energy projects like oil pipelines and the Ring of Fire. Let me know what you think of Ford's approach with Trump so far. Let's not forget he threatened to shut off the US's electricity, which some have equated to an act of war. Ford wasn't the only one who expressed joy at the meeting, though. Premiers Scott Moe and Danielle Smith also expressed cautious optimism. Moe said, quote, "I think we do have an opportunity here. Today was a very positive meeting, and I hope that Canadians would feel very positive with their provincial, territorial, and federal leaders coming out of here today in agreement." Smith said she was encouraged by the immediate change of tone, noting Carney's new willingness to support oil development and recognize Canada's energy potential. Surprisingly, this newfound optimism from Smith came only the day after she warned Carney of the risk of losing $14 trillion in wealth due to anti-oil laws. Going into the meeting, Smith reiterated her priorities for Carney, which included working with Alberta to build a pipeline to the BC coast, repealing the emissions cap, Bill C-69, the tanker ban, and the net zero electricity regulations by 2035. At the First Ministers' meeting's final press conference, Smith said that her province was aiming to achieve carbon neutrality by 2050, a goal which is possible through technological advancement without artificially capping energy production. Smith said, quote, "When we hear the Prime Minister talking about being an energy superpower, we haven't heard that kind of language for some time, and you simply wouldn't have a policy of leaving a $9 trillion asset in the ground where it can stand to benefit everyone." However, little did Smith know that almost everything she said in this press conference would be in vain. We'll hop into that right away, but first we'll quickly cover one good thing Ford did. While Ford celebrated Carney and the meeting, he was also critical of previous red tape and taxes that had stymied energy production in Canada. He said, quote, "If we continue putting red tape and regulations and high taxes, guess what? No one is going to come and invest. But we're all confident, and I'm confident with the leadership of the Prime Minister, that he's creating the environment and conditions for people to come here and companies to come here and invest and tell the world Canada is open for business." So let's give credit where credit is due. At least Ford was critical of the previous Liberal government and its red tape, regulation, and high taxes. Ford said, quote, United we stand, divided we fall. And I can tell you, we're a united group. But maybe they're not quite as united as they initially positioned themselves to be, with more recent news out of BC. Also, if you've watched this far, make sure to like and subscribe. So, as the premiers were meeting, there seemed to be a consensus surrounding energy projects and pipelines in Canada's near future. But that only lasted for one day. Of course, Carney previously said he would support building pipelines if certain conditions were met, one being consensus among the provinces. Although I should give the caveat that Carney told different stories to French and English communities, still said he'd support Bill C-69, aka the No More Pipelines bill, and more or less just seemed to be acting in the sense that he told whomever he was speaking to at the time seemed to want to hear. Still, none of that seems to matter because BC Premier David Eby was notably absent from Monday's meeting, where his peers suggested that the aforementioned consensus had been met, with numerous premiers celebrating the future of pipelines and none opposing. Eby did not attend the meeting because he had already planned to attend a 10-day trip to Asia to diversify the province's trade relationship. Deputy Premier Nikki Sharma attended in his absence. Eby said he would not support building a new oil pipeline through BC the day after the other premiers met in Saskatchewan. Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre said that given Carney's claim that a pipeline would only occur if a consensus was met, Eby's opposition adds to the non-consensus within the Liberal cabinet. Poilievre said, quote, "So despite grand statements, press conferences, and meetings, Liberals have no plan to get one built, leaving us helplessly reliant on the Americans, more elbows down from the Liberals." As for the non-consensus within the Liberal cabinet, Canadian Culture Minister Stephen Guilbeault previously claimed developers don't want to build new pipelines. His comments, of course, came despite him being shuffled off the environment file. However, Alberta Premier Danielle Smith demanded that the new Environment Minister, Julie DeBrusin, disavow the misleading comments made by Guilbeault. In fact, when speaking at the final press conference of the First Ministers' meeting, Smith outlined the optimal economic scenario for a pipeline to be built in BC. Take a listen of what she had to say.
Do you feel that we need to get the bitumen out of the ground now as is, as soon as possible?
Well, let's call it the grand bargain, that we know that there is a group of oil sands companies that have been advocating for some time for what they call the Pathways Project that would decarbonize the production of their bitumen through the use of carbon capture, utilization, and storage, ultimately using hydroelectric or small modular nuclear to decarbonize, and then direct air capture for the last mile. I think the point I was making to the Prime Minister and my colleagues is that there's lots of ways to decarbonize, but the Pathways Project is an expensive project. It would cost anywhere from $10 to $20 billion to get built. And to make the economic case for that, having more egress with more barrels to be sold to Asia is the way to pay for it. If we had a 1 million barrel a day pipeline going to the northwest BC coast, that would generate about $20 billion a year in revenues. And so that seems like a pretty good value proposition if both of those projects can proceed at once.
A pretty compelling argument made there by Smith, but it seems as if Eby won't let this happen. I guess it's Canada first and Team Canada from Eby until the rest of the country actually needs something, and then instead of elbows up, it's middle fingers up. My name's Isaac Lamoureux, and it was a pleasure to bring you the news today. Thanks for listening, and God bless you.